Well, welcome everyone to Positive Leadership, why most managers get it wrong and how you can get it right. My name is Diana Asbury and I will be your moderator for today's session. This is a Q&A with Don Rheem, the CEO at E3 Solutions, which is a science-based management consulting firm that helps companies increase employee engagement. Now, we're calling in from the Rapid Learning Institute headquarters. It's located just outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I'm joined here by our founder and CEO. His name is Stephen Meyer, and he will be interviewing Don today. I want to take this moment and thank you all for joining us. Let me ask you, are you here because you know that your ultimate role is to drive performance and you want to learn positive leadership skills to help your employees stay motivated and engaged? If so, what I want you to do is go back to that question box right now and type in yes or I'm here. Let us know that you are here and you're ready to get started. And okay, great. Gina, Carolyn, Cindy, Kimberly, Michael, Linda, Eric. Oh, it's great to see all of you here and ready to get going. We are really excited that you're here. Now, I want to share something with you. Here at the Rapid Learning Institute, our goal is to empower leaders. It's the reason we created the Leadership and Management Rapid Learning Center. We create short 5 to 7 minute micro-learning programs that help busy managers like you replicate the skills in others that made them successful. Each of these super short learning programs delivers one powerful leadership concept, taking on everyday challenges you face. There are over 50 in our online system. Now, for years, we've worked with employee engagement expert Don Rheem, and today, he'll be sharing the science behind positive leadership and providing tactical advice that all leaders in any organization can apply to build a productive and engaged workforce. This event will be split into 2 parts. In the first 20 minutes or so, Don will be debunking 3 myths about positive leadership. Then, if it's okay with you, we will take just about 60 seconds to share a little more about the Leadership and Management Rapid Learning Center. Like I said, it'll be about a minute long, and then we're going to go ahead and get right back to the final 2 concepts and follow that with your questions. So at any point during today's presentation, you can ask questions using that same questions box right on the right-hand side of your screen. In the toolbar, you can collapse the toolbar and expand it by using the orange arrow at the top. Now, immediately after this session, you'll receive an email with a link to a survey. We really do appreciate your feedback. We look at all of it, and we use it to better all of these programs. So please take a minute, share your feedback, and if you do, as a thank you, we'll send you a free ebook. So let's go ahead and get started. First, I want to introduce today's host, Stephen Meyer. Hi, Steve. How you doing?
Hello.
Hello. All right. Steve is our founder and CEO. He developed a model for 5 to 7 minute quick take rapid learning modules. Prior to starting our company, he was the director of publishing at the Hay Group, which is a leading HR benefits and compensation consulting firm. He received his MBA from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. And I'm very excited to introduce today's guest speaker, whose name is Don Rheem. Hey, Don.
Hi.
You there, Don?
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I am here. Hello.
Great. So, Don is the CEO at E3 Solutions, where he oversees the firm's training initiative. Don lectures on employee engagement throughout North America and Europe, helping thousands of CEOs understand the key drivers of exceptional workplace behavior. Don is a former science advisor to Congress and the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services. Thank you both for joining us. Steve, I'll go ahead and turn this over to you.
Don, thanks a lot for being here today, and thanks to all of you in the audience. So Don, at RLI, we're all about finding strategies for employee development that are grounded in research. And today we're going to be focusing on the science of positive leadership. And we've been a big fan of your work for many years because you share our emphasis on science and research, and we look forward to seeing what you put together today. Let me start with a general question. Tell me, Don, why positive leadership is so important for organizations to get right today?
Well, I'd probably identify a couple of different things. One, we are on the cliff edge of the most severe labor shortage we've ever faced in the history of our economy. And the way we lead and manage people going forward is going to be crucial because When you get talent, when you get people that can do things well, it's going to be very, very challenging to replace them if they elect to leave. And one of the key reasons that employees do leave organizations is because of their relationship with their immediate manager or supervisor. In fact, 85% of people who voluntarily terminate state as one of the key reasons they left was because of their relationship with their immediate supervisor. When you dig into this, we just discover that a lot of managers just don't have the natural skills to lead effectively. So what we've done at E3 Solutions is we focus on neuroscience and the brain, and the part of the brain that drives virtually everything we do, which is called the limbic system, L-A-M-B-I-C. Here's what we know about negativity in the brain. It takes 5 positives to neutralize 1 negative in the brain. So it's really, really important for organizations not simply to add more positive things into the culture, which would be great, but look at the ratio, 5 to 1. The highest return on the investment for positive leadership is to try to remove as many of the negatives in the workplace as possible. And organizations that don't get that right, that can't get it right, are going to suffer. And they're going to find it harder to hold on to talent, and they're going to find it harder to recruit talent going forward.
Don, most of the attendees today are familiar with the concept of positive leadership, but there are still many common beliefs about this approach. I think that are holding managers back. And these beliefs prevent managers from doing the right things that create a positive culture. So as we go through today's presentation, we're going to be reviewing 5 myths. I know Diana said 3 earlier, but we've added a couple. 5 myths about positive leadership. And we're going to, Don, you're going to help us dispel these myths or address these myths with what we know about science. We'll then discuss the skills and tactics that managers can use to bring positive leadership into their everyday actions as managers.
Okay.
Let's go forward with myth number 1. Positive leadership is squishy. Don, I'm sure that you hear this all the time. When you talk to organizations about positive leadership, it's a natural reaction. Positive leadership is squishy. It's feel-good stuff. It's getting together and singing Kumbaya, or just being nice to employees or praising them when they do a good job. Is that what we're talking about, or is there more to it than that?
Well, there's a lot more to it than that. What we want to do is to create an environment at work where people thrive, where they can do their best work, where they get excited about coming to work, and they're motivated not because of programs or poster campaigns, but they're motivated because their brain feels good when it's at work. The highest return on investment an organization can do to increase employee engagement is to create a more positive leadership structure, frame, culture inside the organization. The science on this is clear. There's one particular researcher named Kim Cameron who's done extensive research on this and has written a number of books on positive leadership that lay out the science. It's anything but squishy. Here a little bit of a backdrop, Steve. If we go back to 1815 in the United States, and that's right outside of Newark, New Jersey, around 1815 is when the Industrial Revolution began in the United States. And that's where we went from being an economy where things were made by hand and at home to by a machine and in a factory. From 1815, from the beginning of the Industrial Revolution until about, a year ago, there's been one constant about labor that has driven the way most organizations lead and manage their people. And that has been, there have always been more people than there were jobs. From the history of the Industrial Revolution until about a year ago, there were always more people in the economy than there were jobs to employ them. And that kind of environment, employees had to comply with essentially whatever the terms of the employment contract were. If you had a horrible manager, a toxic manager, you would still come to work because the most important thing was having a job. And having a job, certainly in times of depression or World War, in those kinds of lean times, having a job was the difference between surviving and not. So managers could be very lazy in the way they led and managed people, and they could be hierarchical, top-down, and punitive. They could yell. They could do all kinds of things, and employees would still show up to work because employees needed the job. And they knew that if they couldn't do it, there were other people out there unemployed that would take that job in a nanosecond. Well, those days, that era is gone. We are now entering an era, and will for the rest of our economy, be in an environment where there are more jobs than there is talent to fill it. And in this kind of environment, you have to use science to lead and motivate people. You can't use the old, almost parental style of being, again, punitive, top-down, and hierarchical. That won't work. And this isn't squishy. This is, people will walk with their feet. They'll leave. And managers that can't get this right, and companies that can't give managers the skills, for example, to hold people accountable without being negative, are going to be at a disadvantage.
Don, can you give an example of effective positive leadership and how it's different from what some people might call feel-good leadership?
Well, I think an example would be how we hold people accountable. And in the old way, managers rush in and they judge, and they are punitive, and they threaten people often with their job. They see things like, you can be replaced, and most of the recognition that employees got was negative. There are ways to hold employees accountable without being negative, and they're far more effective. And one method of this, for example, is a process where you open with curiosity, you ask them questions about what happened and why, you make it clear that that's not the target that was sought and what went wrong, and then you essentially say, what could we have done differently to get to the solution or the place that we wanted? That would be just one example.
Don, can I interrupt you a second? Because you just spilled over into myth number 2. Why don't we just go right into that? Myth number 2 is you can't hold people accountable with positivity. And you're basically addressing that right now, so keep going.
Sure. You can hold people accountable. And this is, well, let me give you an example. So, well, first of all, and I don't want to, take too much of a deep dive into the science, but everything we do as human beings, we do for relational reasons. Just everything the brain does, it does through a relational lens. And it's typically relationships with other people, but it can be relationships with values, things like integrity and honesty and transparency, moral are all things that people are in relationship with. Employees form relationships at work with their colleagues, with their boss, with the mission and the vision. So inside the workplace, the most powerful tool to work with are relationships with each other, and relationships to key to values that people hold on. And I'll give you a specific example here of how we do this for some of our clients when they're in this situation. This process is called creating a shared sense of social identity. So I'm sitting in front of, and I did this recently with a company in the Midwest, and I'm with a group of their employees in an auditorium, and I said, how many of you see yourself as a person of integrity? And every hand in the room went up. Everybody saw themselves as a person of integrity. Now, some of them, we know they're aspirational in that, but they want to be that. That's something that they hold out there that they want. In that instant, very quickly, I created a sense of shared social identity using integrity as the value. Then what I did, and all of the people listening can do this same thing, you then say, okay, so what does that look like in the workplace? What are some examples of integrity? If you saw someone doing something that represented integrity, what would that be? And you write those things down. And you're writing them down, and then you can turn to them. And let's say in this particular case, the issue in this organization was gossip, very pernicious, ugly, negative gossip. And my assignment was to try to put the brakes on that. So I'm going through what integrity looks like. And people are saying things like, oh, that you do what you say, you show up on time, you support others. And I'm writing all this down. Then I turn to the group and I say, hey, what about gossip? is gossip an example of someone with integrity? And everyone in the room shook their head no. So this may sound like a trivial thing, but it's enormously important. What that does now, everyone in the room saw themselves as a person of integrity, and now everyone in the room has agreed that being someone who gossip is out of integrity, lacks integrity. So going forward now, any employee in that organization that wants to gossip has to admit cognitively to themselves that they lack integrity when they do it. That's going to put brakes on it. Here's the other side of it. The person who is sitting in their office and someone comes in and starts gossiping about whatever, the person sitting down listening says, well, to themselves at first, hey, wait a minute, just participate. Me participating in this conversation lacks integrity. And they are much more likely to tell the person, hey, you know what? I don't feel comfortable about this. I don't think I want to have this conversation. We all agree that this kind of gossip lacks integrity. So you put the brakes on the person who is gossiping, and you put the brakes on the recipient. That there's no overt negativity in there. There's no penalizing someone being punitive, top-down, or hierarchical. It's using relationships to impact people's behavior.
So Don, let's assume for a moment that I am a legacy manager, old school, and I've got somebody who's not cooperating or not performing very well, and who's not being held accountable. And my instinct as a legacy manager might be to go to that person and tell them, you're failing. There's winners and losers in this company, and you're performing like a loser, and you got to get your act together or you're out of here. Would you say that that's a fairly standard, old school legacy way to deal with an employee who's not being held accountable?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Steve. And managers, some of these managers actually pride themselves. This is the typical thing that I hear from managers that do that. They say, hey, Don, I just keep it real. I just tell it like it is, and everybody appreciates that in me. And so I just rip the person a new one. I'm just keeping it real. That's that typical way that the legacy manager, justifies that behavior. It is pretty typical. You're absolutely right.
All right. What's the correct? What advice would you give me?
Well, I'll give you one example, and this is something again that we work with on clients. And this is the hardest part for managers. Find something that employee does well. And so let me just create a scenario. So I'm going to go to Mary. And Mary is very, very good with customers. She's just great. Customers love her. But when she works with other employees in the organization, she's dismissive, she's aloof, and she just thinks she's better than other people, and the other employees have come to resent it. So I'm her manager. So I'm going to go to Mary, and I'm going to start with unmitigated, unfettered, unwatered down, if you will, appreciation. And it's going to be something like this. Mary, the work you do with our customers is just remarkable. The way you're responsive to them, you meet their needs, you really listen to them, and you hear what their needs are, and you just respond so effectively. I've always really been impressed with the level of respect and collaboration that you give to our customers. So let me just pause there for a second. There's no if, but, however, or anything else. That has to sit there and stand as a clear piece of appreciation for what they do when they're at work. Then what I'm going to do as the manager, and this is what we would consider to be the manager being vulnerable. And as Mary's manager, I'm then going to say this. But Mary, I'm confused. Help me understand, though, because you demonstrate so much respect for our customers and clients. But then when I see you interacting with some of the staff in the company, I just see a different approach. I don't see the same level of respect and collaboration as you give to the customers, and I'm just confused on the difference in the approaches, because all of these people are very important to us. We have internal customers, which are our employees, and then we have our external. Help me understand why you seem to interact with these two groups of people so differently. So the goal here is to set a high standard of something the person does well that you respect, and then you contrast it to these other behaviors, and you go in from a point of vulnerability. I'm confused. Help me understand. And get them to see that dichotomy, that difference, and have them try to explain it. What happens here is we start to make these employees more self-aware of their impact, because often they're not aware of their impact in this way. And I lead with curiosity rather than being, again, blaming or shaming or being punitive.
Let me give you another sort of scenario. I have an employee who constantly comes in late. And I'm a legacy manager, and my gut instinct is just to make it sort of give her a monetary threat, like I'm gonna fine you if you come in late.
Yeah.
Give me another way. Give me another way to deal with that employee.
Well, I would, if it was just one employee and no one, well, let me start differently. If a number of employees were showing up late chronically, not necessarily together, but it was more than just a singular issue, I would go back to my creating a sense of shared social identity. I would probably use the word integrity again, and I would turn to the audience and the group after we were writing things down, and I would say, what about showing up late? Is that an example of great integrity? And I would just ask them, and they would self-define it. No, it isn't. By the way, at the end of that process, what I like to do is to create best practices. So I'd say, okay, so what are some best practices we could do as a team or as a group or a department to demonstrate more integrity? So showing up on time, would that be a best practice that would fit? And so I identify these things, but then turn the solution into a best practice. Now, back to your question, Steve. If it was just one person, I would use the same example I did with Mary. And I would go to John, and I would say, John, when you turn in your reports at the end of the week, I'm always amazed at how complete and thorough you are. You just demonstrate a great sense of detail and integrity to the numbers and how you pull them together. But if it's okay, there's something I've been curious about, and I just don't understand, and I need your help to make sense of. You're absolutely spot on these numbers. Everything is exactly where it needs to be. But when it comes to showing up on time when you get to work, the numbers, the time of day, if you will, don't seem to matter. And you don't seem to have the same level of integrity around showing up and those numbers as you do in the ones you turn in your report. Help me understand how you see these things differently. I would create the same form of contrast. The other way, let me give you one other. I'll give you one more. When people show up on time to meetings, you validate them for being there on time or early. And you say, hey, thank you, thanks Monique for being here on time. It's really helpful when you do that. So you validate the person as soon as they're there. So that reinforces them continuing to show up on time. Then when the person comes in late, then you do the process again and you say, and by the way, I just want to thank everybody that was here on time. It shows so much respect for us and for each other and how we respect each other's time when we are here on time. So I just wanted to really thank those of you that were here early and on time for today's meeting. And that's enough. I'm not going to identify and point out the person that was late. I'm just going to give positive reinforcement to the people that were there on time. The message is pretty clear.
All right, great example. And that's number 3. Positive leadership is for leaders who avoid conflict. Fire away, Don.
Yeah, we are not trying to avoid, avoid conflict. We have people that are what we call conflict avoiders, and that's a therapeutic term. There's a standard definition for that. And these are people that rather than holding someone accountable, they just will ignore what happened because they want to avoid perceived conflict. We do want to hold people accountable. It's very hard to have a high-performance culture where employees are engaged if employees aren't held accountable. And let me just footnote that. A and B players want to work with other A and B players. And when you have a culture where people are not held accountable, those would typically be your C and D players. that your top staff, your top employees don't want to work with those people. So you encourage disengagement when you don't hold people accountable. The key here, and it's something that I've already talked about, is showing managers how to hold people accountable without being negative. And that is what we talk about. We have a positive leadership workshop that we do at E3 Solutions. And that's the skills that we try to do. And Steve, if it's okay, I'd also like to say I just published a book with that was published by Forbes, and in the book there is a chapter on positive leadership that lays out how to do it. And if any of your listeners want to get that book, all they have to do is go to Amazon and search for my name, Don Rheem, and they'll find the book. The title of the book is Thrive by Design: The Neuroscience That Drives High Performance Cultures.
Don, and that question I asked you about the person who's late, I listened very carefully to your response, and I noticed that you used the ABC method when you gave the answer. You followed it absolutely to the letter. Can you go over that ABC method?
Yes, I'd be happy to. And I'm not typically a fan of acronyms because they're pretty tortured, but when we train on our positive leadership workshop, we promote a method, and it's laid out in the book, called the ABC method. So the first thing you do is you start with appreciation, and you appreciate something that employee does well. You can't then end that again with a but or a however. You just a straight appreciation. That's the A, appreciation. The B is for be real, and that's where we're going to hold them accountable. And the B would be, you know what, Georgette, we didn't get anywhere close to where we wanted to on this project. And I know we all, your team, you tried really hard. We didn't get across the goal line. We're not anywhere close to the goal line. And we have to figure out a way to do this better because we really need to be successful in this area. So that's the be real. You're holding them accountable. You want to use the right pronoun. You want to use we, us, as opposed to you. And then the C in the ABC. So A, some form of appreciation. B, be real. Let them know we didn't get to the goal line. And you say we didn't get to the goal line. Don't use the word you. And then the C in the ABC method is curiosity. And so and you have to do all three, and this is the right order. The third thing the manager then needs to do is to say to Georgette, what I need to know now is what could we do differently going forward so that we would have been more successful? Or you can say, what could we have done differently in order to get a better outcome? You can reach into the past, which is slightly more threatening, or you can look into the future, which is less threatening to the brain, and say, what could we do going forward? And note the use of the word we. Pronoun use is absolutely essential here. And it's also more accurate. If an employee fails in an organization, for those that are listening that know anything about systems theory, they fail because the organization let them fail. There's something in the systems or processes or relationships that allow that person to fail without it being caught. And so I like using the word we. In fact, I tell managers, I would like you to say, and Georgette, I'm wondering if there's something I should have done differently where I let you down. And you say, so let's talk about what we could do differently. But don't expect the employee to know that in the moment. This is where you want to give them overnight to think about it. So ideally, the manager would say, can we meet tomorrow for lunch and talk about what we could have done differently on this project, or certainly what we should do differently going forward? Do you have time? Can we meet for lunch tomorrow to talk about this? This completely changes the trajectory of what typically happens to an employee. In the old school method, top-down, hierarchical, and punitive, the employee is shamed, judged, blamed, made to feel they're inadequate, and the natural response of the human brain is to be either defensive or despondent as a result of that kind of onslaught. As one really brilliant neuroscientist at University of Virginia in Charlottesville told me, anything overtly negative is a punch to the brain. It just doesn't have positive impacts. So what we're trying to do here, Steve, with the ABC method is to get underneath the person's defenses and actually get them to think differently. Now, instead of going home feeling blamed and shamed, the employee goes home and focuses on what could be done differently in the past, should have been done differently in the past, or could be done differently going forward. And that's a huge difference, because now the employee is growing and is actually smarter and better, as opposed to just shamed.
Yeah, and the C is the big difference between the ABC method and the sandwich method. I think a lot of enlightened legacy managers use the sandwich method, where you say something nice about somebody, then you say the bad thing that's the real person at the meeting, and then you end with a good thing. And I think people get a little cynical about that. Whereas when you end with curiosity, you put the focus back on the employee. And it's a growth opportunity for them. And it takes the curse off that sandwich technique, which people get cynical about. Do you agree?
Oh, that positive sandwich is a waste of time. It doesn't work. People see right through it. It's seen as disingenuous. It actually undermines the manager's integrity. I would not advocate using it at all, and yeah, we have to move away from that. Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to turn the program back to Diana for a minute for our scheduled break, and we'll return with Donna in a couple of minutes and talk about myth number 4.
Thank you so much, Steve, and I want to thank all of you who are joining us today for allowing me these 60 seconds to share a little bit more about the Leadership and Management Rapid Learning Center. But first, before I get to this, I want to ask all of you who are joining us what you think so far about the information that Don has been sharing with you today. Go ahead and type your feedback in that questions box. It's located in the toolbar on the right-hand side of your screen. Go ahead and share what you think so far of the information you've been given. Now, today, Don has been sharing the science behind positive leadership, and the Leadership and Management Rapid Learning Center has multiple modules that Don has helped us to create. One is called Focus, Capability, and Will. The next one is called The Power of Validation. We have one called Tapping into Discretionary Effort, and another one on Leadership and Attachment. The Learning Center covers so much more, and the reality is most managers really weren't born knowing how to lead a team. They need guidance. So there are over 50 of these 5 to 7 minute modules in the Leadership and Management Rapid Learning Center. And what I want to do now is give you the opportunity to receive free trial access to the complete online system. So we're going to launch a poll up on your screen. Now this will stay up for the next 15 to 20 seconds as we finish this process up right here. And each of these, I want to remind you of these 5 to 7 minute modules, is focused on a single research-based leadership concept. It's not just for new managers. It's also a great resource for experienced managers and executives as well. So you'll be able to access the programs anytime, anywhere when you start your trial. Go ahead and select one of those options up on screen. And in the meantime, let me just give some of this feedback to Steve and Don real quick. Let's see. Linda said, I really like ending with curiosity. Let's see. Michelle said, it is interesting and will be challenging to convert existing managers to a new style. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit in the Q&A. Let's see. Nancy said, great content, very beneficial to me because I have a very negative department. Oh, boy. We have so much feedback coming in. I want to thank you all for sending it in, and we'll look at this after today's presentation. Now I want to turn this back over to Steve, and we'll get to the last 2 myths and then do your questions. So write in your questions now as well.
All right, myth number 4, positive leadership is just for leaders who have bubbly, upbeat personalities. I guess another way to say that is you have to be a positive person to practice positive leadership. That's a myth. Tell us why that's a myth, Don.
Well, we all know these people that are bubbly and effervescent, and we love having them around because they do provide a positive vibe. But being a positive leader is not going to be restricted to those personality types. Anybody can practice this and do it better. Every manager needs to be able to demonstrate some of these positive leadership skills. We can talk about, for example, one of the things that we do in our training is we distinguish between validation, recognition, and feedback. And let me just go through those, how we define those 3 things and show you how any leader can do that regardless of their personality. type. Validation is something that managers should do for employees, and it's unconditional. That is, you don't give validation to an employee for something they've done for you or the company. You give validation to employees because they're human beings. And validation needs to occur every day. It's a hello, it's a good morning, it's a how are you, it's a good to see you. This is the most fundamental act of one human being recognizing the presence of another. And this is something that we are hardwired to need at birth. Not something that we learned as we grew up, but literally in the human genome, in the biological operating system we're born with, is a need essentially for constant validation. We need to be seen and valued for being there. So that's number one. And that needs to occur daily. So we ask managers, make sure you're doing that. You don't have to be a bubbly person to say good morning to someone. It's funny, I was working where we measure engagement inside organizations, and we're in our 5th year of doing this with an engineering company based out of Minneapolis, a national engineering firm. Anyway, I'm in a room with about 50 of these engineers that are now managers, and I'm talking about the importance of relationships and validation. I said, so what's one thing you can ask your employees that's not invasive, but you could learn something about them that's valid and that's validating? And it was dead silence in the room. You could have heard a pin drop. So that's when I realized I needed to slice this question thinner. And I said, okay, it's Monday morning and your employees are coming into work. What's something that you could do that's validating but not invasive? And there was silence in the room, and then slowly this one hand went up with trepidation. And I said, yeah, Bob, what could you say? And he said, well, I could ask them how their weekend was. And he said it with, very tenuous tone of voice, like he was going to get hammered. And I said, well, that's perfect, Bob. How many of you could do that? And then all the hands went up. They're like high-fiving each other like they'd broken the code for validation. These are not typically bubbly personalities, but this is something that they could do. So I then asked them for a second question they could ask their employees, thinking I was on a roll, and we went back to dead silence again. So then I sliced it thinner, and I said, okay, it's Friday afternoon. What's something you could ask your employees? And now a bunch of hands went up and they said, well, we could ask them what they're doing for the weekend. So anyway, that's validation, needs to occur daily. Recognition is conditional, and it needs to be given to employees for something that they've done. And that should be done at least once a week. So we ask managers to look for smaller increments of discretionary effort that employees have made and to recognize them for it, say something about it. And you don't have to have an upbeat personality to look for people that are doing the right thing and then commenting on it. Feedback, I won't spend a ton of time on this, but feedback is a confidential one-on-one conversation, and that also should be with a positive frame, and that should occur at least once a month.
Great, Don. Myth number 5. Positive leadership is just for millennials. Now, I know we have a lot of boomer managers out there, a lot of Gen Xers as well, who maybe think that millennials need to be coddled. They don't want to put up with the less fun parts of the job. Is this positive leadership just for them?
No, goodness no. All of us are hardwired to receive validation and recognition. There are two key differences between the millennials, that is the 20 to 32-year-olds, that, by the way, are now the largest segment of the U.S. labor force, and those of us that are in the older generations. That is, the positive recognition and feedback resonates in our brain just as much as it does in the millennial brain. We just don't expect it. We're not looking for it. We don't think we're going to get it because we never did. Millennials, on the other hand, have very high expectations around validation and recognition because they did get a lot growing up. They're just used to getting more of it. This is the first generation in American history to wake up on Saturday morning, get into their athletic gear, go out to the field, play the game, lose the game, and then as they walk off the field, what were they handed? Trophies. This is the first generation in American history to receive trophies for losing. Again, it's not their fault. They didn't hand them out. Their parents did. We did. But what it has helped to encourage is a very high sense of, hey, I'm going to get lots of recognition for validation. Even when I lose, I should get some kind of an award. Now, the way this translates into the workplace is millennials do have higher needs for it. However, I want to restate again, all human brains receive the positive recognition and feedback the same. That is, there's a chemical reaction. A little oxytocin, a little dopamine gets released in the pleasure centers of the brain, and it feels good. We need to do this for all generations because all of the brains will respond in the same way.
All right, thanks a lot. I have a couple of questions, but I'm going to skip them because we have so many questions from the audience. So Diana, why don't you get that rolling?
Awesome. Well, this wraps up the formal part of the presentation. Of course, we could talk about positive leadership all day, and we are going to get right to your questions. I kind of flagged down Steve and said, hey, we have these really awesome questions coming in, so let's get right to them. Before we do, I just want to go ahead and put up that free trial option again. So I mentioned before that Don has helped us create multiple modules in the Leadership and Management Rapid Learning Center. And I mentioned that before, but we also have a brand new program called Employee Motivation, the Surprise and Power of Line of Sight, and it is getting awesome reviews. So when you start a trial with us, you'll get access to all of these modules. There's over 50 of them in the system. Each one is 5 to 7 minutes long, and it's focused on a single research-based leadership concept, so you can go ahead and put them to work immediately. So hey guys, the first option here is for a trial. The second option is for more information. I'm going to leave this poll up during our live Q&A now. So once you click one of the options, don't click out of this because it will exit you from the system. We've heard that from others, and we don't want that to happen to you. We want you to be here to hear these awesome, awesome questions coming in. I want to start with Michelle's question. How can you stay positive with employees that don't accept positive feedback? I have a couple that don't say good morning back to me. I figure that they are in a bad mood, and I keep on my way, but should I stop them and find out why they don't return the good morning to me?
Well, first let me say they should be held accountable for their behavior and their attitude, and this is a bigger question. I mentioned before that there's a difference between validation, recognition, and feedback, and this feedback is this monthly one-on-one conversation. There's a saying in my field, you can only expect what you inspect. So if you are not talking to people about their attitude, you really don't have much impact on it. What I want managers talking to employees about in those feedback sessions are three things. Number one, job performance. That's the most tried and true. That's what it usually is now. How are they performing based on their job description? But that's where most managers stop. I want to add two other things to the conversation. Their behaviors is the second, and their attitude as the third. And managers need to be talking to their employees about how they behave and their attitudes. Now, here's something that commonly happens, and we get this all the time. The employee says, that's not in my job. There's nothing in my job description that says I need to show up all cheery and say good morning to people. And that's true. It's not in their job description. But here's where I think HR and senior leaders and people that are listening to this webinar can have an impact. And this is where you go to core values. And this is where core values can come alive and actually become useful. So when the person says that's not my job description, the manager says, actually, it is a part of your job. Everyone that works here at GlobeX Corp has signed on to our core values. And one of our core values is, let's say it's mutual respect, or it could be collaboration. It could be, strong relationships. Whatever the core value is, find the core value in your list of core values that comes the closest that could be applied to this, and let them know that is a part of your job. And in fact, our core values are probably more important than your actual job description, because they are what's going to make us a truly great company.
All right, this next question here comes from Angela. My entire team is virtual. How can we be more effective in engaging and communicating virtually?
Yeah, this is one of the toughest assignments for the new workplace. There is no substitute in the human brain for the presence of another. And many organizations, and some of you listening have probably heard that IBM and others are calling people back into the office. They're really cutting back on the teleworking for this very, very reason. Now, if you do have a workforce that's entirely virtual, you have to work harder to create meaningful relationships in that group. And you can use technology to do that. At E3 Solutions, we use a platform called Slack so that everybody is talking to each other all the time. There are a number of other programs that do the same thing. You need to make more use of Google Hangouts where people are seeing each other. You have to bring in images, faces, even if they're static images. It's better than no image at all. Words, this is just something about the brain. Words are chaos in the brain. Words have to be converted into something that the brain understands. Pictures and images are like concrete. They're solid. They're immediately understood and sense is made of them. We need to see people's faces. We need to see the people, and we'll make much better sense and we'll form much stronger connections if we do. I know this generation and many generations love, texting and IMing and email, but you do not create strong relationships in 140 characters. This doesn't happen.
All right, awesome. All right, Marion and Kimberly both have asked if we were going to be getting a recording of the presentation. Absolutely. We are recording this now, and we will be sending it to you later in the week, so look out for that email. And just a reminder, also, we'll be sending you the survey link as soon as this program is over. Our next question here comes from JC. Will a younger person who happens to be a millennial using these methods on an older generation still be effective?
Well, they will be. In the sense of brain science, neuroscience, these techniques work universally. And that's one of the beauties of the approach that we take at E3 is these things we recommend work across gender, ethnicity, education, background, culture. It really doesn't matter. What drives our behavior as human beings is remarkably universal. So yes, it can work on older workers. Now, there are some additional layers to that onion, and that is, this is what's happening to a lot of Gen Xers primarily. We see this in our data. When companies use our employee engagement survey tool, we ask employees to put down a date range for their date of birth so that we can run the data by age cohort and compare generations and how their engagement's doing. And one of the things that we're seeing is the Gen Xers have the lowest levels of engagement typically when we look at our global numbers. And here's what's happening for them. They joined a company, they worked for years to get their first promotion and then more years to get their next promotion. And they're finally in a position where they have some leadership. And now they're seeing these millennials come in and essentially leapfrog ahead and get titles in 2 years that it previously took Gen Xers 5 or 6 years to get. And some of them are resentful, some of them are angry, some of them are just afraid. So the millennial who is managing someone who is older than them should definitely be practicing positive leadership, should be collaborating, should be inclusive, should be doing things with their employees, not to their employees. So some is just going to be the tone of the voice, the prosody of the voice, and the expression on their face.
Okay, awesome. All right, so I want to mention 2 things. One is from Kimberly, who says, I do manage in this way and get criticized by my manager who says I am too nice and too positive with my people. So he does not buy into positive leadership. And then we have Karmesha, who says, what is the best approach with handling negativity among the leadership group? So if you are in a management role or leadership role, how do you get the other leaders in your organization to buy into positive leadership, get on board with it?
Well, I would start sharing the science with them. So you might be able to sneak a copy of a book on positive leadership. And again, the one I recommend is by a guy named Kim Cameron. I've never met the man. I don't know him, and I certainly am not involved in his book sales. But you could drop a positive leadership book on the desk of your manager some evening so they don't even know who put it there. You also could, and we strongly advocate in leadership science, and that is sharing science with leaders. When you share the scientific data with them, the empirically validated data of the impact of this, they can't deny it. Most of them don't like it, we have found, because they're afraid of it. They don't know how to do it. It wasn't done for them. They think it's soft, and the first myth we talked about it being squishy. We need to approach these people using science, and I can tell you in our work with clients, almost to the CEO, they say the reason we brought you in is because of the science angle. So many leaders now are burned out and fried on all of these leadership fads that come and go. Stick to the science, and there's a bunch of peer-reviewed articles that talk about the impact, and no one can deny the impact of negativity on the human brain. It's just there's absolutely no ambiguity, if you will, about the impact of negativity on the brain. You could manage people with negativity back in this era when there were more people than there were jobs. But going forward, those managers will not, they just won't be successful. They're going to have a really hard time holding on to staff. Maybe you could do more sophisticated job at exit interviews and ask people, why are you leaving? And they're going to bring up these issues about relationships and negativity. That would be another angle.
All right. We have lots of Michelles today. This is another Michelle question. I have a long-time 30-year employee not performing well. Due to the corporate culture, I would not consider terminating her. Additional ideas on how to manage her?
Yeah, I would sit down with her and I would be curious, and I would say, Jane, you've been with us for 30 years. You've seen a lot go on in this company. I'd love to have a conversation with you about what you consider to be the most successful employees here at our company, and what those employees did and who they were, and just tell me their stories. And I would get her to talk to you about the people she's been the most impressed with in her career, and then start and I'd facilitate that a little bit and elevate what she says into higher order values. So she might say something like, well, they did what they said they were going to do. And you reply, okay, so they had a lot of integrity. And she'd say yes. And get her to describe these employees that she had so much respect for. And then when she's done that, say, well, how can we do more of this with the employees we have today? And maybe ask her, could you partner with me on this? Because I really would like to do a better job of talking about what successful behaviors look like here, but could you work with me on this? And because I think you could be a great example of this. Now, that may sound a little crazy because she was underperforming, but here's what we know. If you bring people in, if you're inclusive, if you ask them for your help, they're much more likely to change their behavior in that positive frame than they are by going in with a negative one. These employees often know they're probably not going to be fired. They have too strong of a relationship with senior leaders or founders. But go in and just remind them of what greatness looks like, and they're more likely to move in that direction. And then if she doesn't, if there's no movement, you come back in a month or 2 months and you say, Jane, so we talked about these things that you've just had so much respect for employees over the years. I'm confused. I wish I was seeing more of those from you on a daily basis. So help me understand what's happened to that just for you. How do these things relate to what you bring to work every day? But you go in with this vulnerability frame. I'm confused. Help me understand, rather than a punitive frame.
All right. I really liked that answer. Thanks for that, Don. All right. So we have some other questions coming in. I just want to remind everyone that we have this poll up on screen. So if you're interested in that trial, you can select the first option. And if you're not quite ready for a trial, but you'd like some more information, select the second one there. All right, so the next question here comes from another Michelle. Yes, I told you we had lots of them today. She is looking for the answer to two questions, which is, what is the difference between positive leadership and servant leadership, as well as if you could give a summary definition of positive leadership?
Well, servant leadership it's a wonderful model, by the way. It's one that we highly endorse. The servant leader is the leader that sees themselves as a coach, not as an overseer, someone who's there to serve the staff to enable them to be more successful. And that has there's lots of origins around that. Some of them are actually quite religious in that form of service and of service. The positive leader is the person who is specifically trying to eliminate the negative influences within the culture and replace them with more positive ones. Because there is just a direct, the human brain thrives in a positive environment. It does not thrive. It actually shuts down. People lose IQ. They could use 10 IQ points in a nanosecond under a negative leader. So the positive leader is one who is trying to support and uplift people and create a positive environment where the brain can thrive in the way it's designed, which is why the title of my book was Thrive by Design, the neuroscience that drives high-performance cultures. We know if we can create that environment or get closer to that environment in the workplace, people will act and behave and work at closer to what they're fully capable of.
Okay, our next question comes from Dina. Do social gatherings at work, such as potlucks or ice cream socials, add a lot of engagement?
Well, they can help, certainly. Again, everything we do through a relational lens, and the quality of the relationships in the organization are probably the most important asset of the organization. So if we're doing these events and people are participating and it's a positive environment, they're good. And they're positive. There are always people, though, and I'm always fascinated by this personality type. There's always someone who writes in or in the evaluation of the event says, hey, take the $8.80 that you spent to buy me my proportion of the food and just give it to me as cash, please. There will always be people like that, but we can't design policies around it. We need to create an environment where people can gather and connect with each other. We need to, it's also a form of validation and recognition for the tribe, the clan, the group as a whole, as opposed to just the individual.
All right, this next question comes from Brad. How do you handle employees who blame their attitudes on people outside of your control area and have a victim mentality?
So we have a process here that we call label and redirect. Label and redirect. And by the way, people can go to e3solutions.com to get more of this, or you can also find out more about the book if you go to donrheem.com, donrheem.com. But let me tell you about the label and redirect. So this is an approach to change people's behavior without being negative. So I'm going to label what is the negative behavior, but I'm going to do it in a neutral way, and then I'm going to redirect them immediately to something that's a more useful and efficient and effective behavior or practice. So someone has come up to me and they've blamed someone else for what happened, and this is what I'm going to say. Robert, I hear the blame, but what I really need to know is what could we have done internally in order to get a better outcome? Or it could be an excuse. Okay, Robert, I hear the excuse, but what I need to know is what could we have done differently? Or I hear the excuse, what could we do differently next time? So it's label and redirect. And you don't label with a negative tone. You don't say, Robert, okay, I hear the blame. Now, tell me what. No, it's just label it in as neutral a tone as possible. And that's all the message you need to send. And then what happens is people begin to understand that they can't come to you with an excuse or with a blame and get away with it. So you're going to change the way they think and approach the issue and the blame. If they think there is someone to blame, they're going to come ready with, okay, what could we have done to mitigate that, to insulate ourselves from it, to not have been trapped by it. But label and redirect is the method we advocate.
All right. Well, Don, real quick, I know you just came out with a book. Repeat what the name of that book is.
Thrive by Design, the neuroscience that drives high performance cultures.
Awesome. Well, everyone can find that book on Amazon or on your website. I pulled it up on my laptop while we were here, so it is right there. You can grab it if you'd like. And I want to thank you all for joining us today. We will be sending you that survey in an email in just a few minutes. So take a look out for that. Take a minute, share your feedback. We do look at every single one of your individual responses. And if you do take that survey, we will send you an ebook as a thank you. I want to thank you so much, Don, for taking the time and sharing all of this awesome advice with us today.
Thank you, Don.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Enjoyed it. Thank you, everyone, for staying in tune with us on this.
Thank you. Bye-bye.